And I will call the January 8th Planning Commission meeting to order. Commissioners, thanks for joining us. Staff, thank you for coming tonight. Our first item on the agenda this evening is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening from commissioners or staff?
None from staff.
No changes. I would stand for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion carries. Our second item is approval of minutes from the December 11th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any changes to those minutes?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Benke?
under approval of minutes from the previous meeting, since I hadn't been at the previous meeting, I abstained, so the fifth vote would have been Commissioner Mohovitz.
Morovich.
I'm sorry.
All right, staff, do we have that update for those minutes? Yes.
Yes, I do.
Got it.
Thank you.
All right, with those changes, is there any other changes? No changes, I would stand for a motion.
So moved.
Second. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, and the motion carries. Our third item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing for City of Burnsville to consider amendments to Title 10 zoning of the city to incorporate housekeeping changes to sign ordinance and changeable copy to 8 seconds. And presenting this evening is Ms. Dean.
Good evening, Chair Workman, members of the commission. Periodically, city staff works through our city code to look for any issues, any inconsistencies within any of the titles within zoning. And so oftentimes you'll see the sign code before you because there is not only, there could be inconsistencies, but there also could be legal ramifications or requests of perhaps the business community or through planning commission or city council people. So you'll see these housekeeping items again through periodically year after year. Specifically within your packet is a proposed red line change of the Chapter 30 of the sign code, as well as an ordinance, proposed draft ordinance format. And then I'll just go ahead and summarize what those changes are and why the request is before you. The first request is for changeable copy signs from 30 seconds to 8 seconds. This specific request was at the request of City Council, and due to the fact that our MnDOT signs, MnDOT regulations is also 8 seconds. Also to be consistent with other city practices that you see throughout the region. It was also pointed out that cities do have regulations that allow changing to be faster than 8 seconds. So this is keeping in with the MnDOT model. Changes are seen throughout the proposal, throughout the code in multiple areas. And so there's probably about 5 to 6 different locations where you'll see the change from 30 seconds to 8 seconds. The next change is to remove content-specific language that addresses holiday signs and for window signs as well. We wanted to make sure that we weren't getting into any type of legal issues or legal contention by mentioning content-specific language. So we're requesting that that's removed. Another request is to allow strings of lights as permitted. Currently, we say this is prohibited within our city code. You may be familiar with JL Beers restaurant. They have a patio and they have exterior lighting that has strings of lights. And this was at the request of part of their planning and development because it was prohibited at the time. However, city staff sees this as a benefit and keeping with today's times. So we're proposing that this is listed as permitted instead. We're proposing to increase the directional signage from 4 square feet to 6 square feet. This is just for consistency within the code. It's inconsistent right now, and we wanted to see that 6 square feet carried on throughout. There's currently a requirement that window signs for commercial businesses, for example, and for community gardens to require a sign permit and review by Planning staff, this is something that would require a permit and fee. Because, for example, window signs, it's constantly changing, the messages are constantly changing through business practice. We're proposing that a sign permit's not required, that it's more business-friendly, also in keeping with what other cities do around the area, no sign permits required. They would still have to meet performance standards, however. We're saying they would still have to meet a 35% cap for their window signage. And then community garden signs, there's very few of them. They're more information-based. When you do look at the signs, and we're saying those should be exempt from requiring a sign permit. We're also proposing to add language stating that non-commercial signs are allowed within any zoning district. We're also requesting that additional language is added to the city code in respects to nameplates. Right now, there's a little bit of conflicting information, so we're adding more specific clarification and direction on when nameplates are allowed, when they're appropriate, and that's a proposed change. We're also requesting removal of the reference to symbols within cabinet logo signs. Right now, you can't have let's see here. You can't have a symbol, so we're saying just get rid of this. We want to make sure, again, that we're not reviewing content, that as long as it's subordinate and still within the square footage requirements, that it should be allowed, that we shouldn't specify symbol or no symbol, logo or no logo, that content's removed, reference. We're also requesting that language is removed from a section that deals with non-conforming signs. There is duplicate language within that section that I believe wasn't removed as part of a previous ordinance. So we would like that removed. We're also requesting that the requirement for a conditional use permit for decorative banners on light poles is removed. Some shopping centers may have holiday signs announcing that it's fall or spring, or maybe a special event within promoting maybe even a city event. We're saying if someone would like that a conditional use permit's not required, you would just have to apply for a sign permit. And that would be for private property. And then we're also proposing to include a reference within our chart for freestanding signs, or allowable signs, excuse me, that references heart of the city. Right now, there's no reference. So you're in the heart of the city section of the code, and it refers you to the sign code Title 10, Chapter 30, and then you kind of get lost. Like, where do I go from here? So this would help direct people to the requirements. With that, I'm certainly open to any questions to help provide any clarification. Staff does recommend that Planning Commission recommend to City Council approval of the proposed ordinance as drafted.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Are there any questions for staff on this item?
Just a couple clarifications,
Yep,
Chair.
Commissioner Benke?
Ms. Dean, the changeable copy signs, and that's any changeable copy sign in the city, it's not just billboards, correct?
It would be, for example, for commercial signs, for a gas station, for example, if they have an advertisement for soda that's on sale.
Sure.
It would be for that. It does not, let's see, it would not change architectural features and the lighting around an architectural feature to change more frequently, but just the sign, like a freestanding sign, for example.
Right, I guess the examples I was thinking of is you have the billboard on 35W, which changes very slowly right now, and that's going to speed up a little bit. But then you also have the sign right up front of City Hall, and that's a changeable copy sign, so that could then change at every 8 seconds. Okay. I think obviously the string of lights for patios is a huge benefit. I mean, not for us individually, but it definitely brings us into more of the norm. And I think there was one other, the clarification, I apologize, I did have to take a call. The reference to symbols only within the cabinet logo sign, can you put that in context with the Aldi sign? Would that have let some of that been in a cabinet sign then, or is that something different?
Unfortunately, I'm not too familiar with the Aldi sign. I didn't specifically work on that. But our goal is to try to remove any reference to content and also provide some more flexibility to business owners. It's such a small square footage because it's referenced as subordinate that staff felt we're giving flexibility without.
I guess the reason I'm asking is that the Planning Commission recommended approval of the cabinet sign as originally proposed by the applicant, and the council did change that to only be the logo of the A, and then they're required to have any text for the name of the store, Aldi, in this case, as letters, separate letters. And would that continue to be the case then?
I'm not quite visualizing it. Let me take a look.
Commissioner Benke, so when they did the sign approval, it was the big A, which is
With
their,
Aldi written
beneath.
just as all as one single cabinet sign, which we approved, but council chose that suggested that didn't meet the standard. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is the standard changing, or does this still maintain the same result that we currently have? And I guess I'm trying to understand what symbols only within cabinet logo signs. This allows for some text in a cabinet sign subordinate to the required individual letters. So the individual letters for Aldi would still be there, but yet some text. There's no real distinguishing feature to that, or?
Trying to find that section, hang on.
I wasn't here when that happened. Was there a plan that they had presented that didn't fit what the existing framework was?
Basically they wanted to do the cabinet sign with the logo and Aldi all just in the cabinet sign, and it's not allowed in the commercial district. You have to have the individual letters in a commercial district. There are some districts that allow a cabinet sign to be a cabinet sign.
Pretty minimal.
Right. Well, I was just curious. I'm just trying to understand, again, how far it goes and what the details are, I guess.
Okay, so no cabinet signs are allowed except for logo signs. And we're striking out that are symbols with no text and descriptive taglines.
So we're striking out the descriptive tagline, so that's the kind of subordinate text we're talking about.
We're keeping the descriptive tagline, however, just striking out that are symbols with no text.
Oh, that's it, okay, I was trying to find it too.
It's in the red line
Yeah.
version.
So no cabinet sign, so it will now read, no cabinet signs are allowed except for logo signs and descriptive taglines. So
Oh, okay. Okay, I think that helps. The reference to the taglines, I understand that is something that a business might have, and that's okay to be on there, then that's fine. Thank you.
And then just one note, any sign permit that's been approved that is in existence now would not be affected by this new code language. It would be, well, it would be considered non-conforming if it was in conflict with the updated language.
Or they could come in and apply for a new permit.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna dwell on that for one more quick second. So would another example of that be like the McDonald's arches and then their tagline of over a billion served? That's what we're referring to?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other questions for staff on this item? No other questions? I just have a quick, couple of clarification pieces. For the nameplate, piece on homes or residential properties, it says they shall not be illuminated. If somebody were to buy an open sign that you can buy at a, a hardware store, would that technically be out of compliance?
Yes, let me, sorry, should have had these tabbed.
That one was on, page 13.
For, let's see here. So for,
I'm just curious if it's specific to the branded sign or if somebody did have, an illuminated open sign. I don't know how many people are doing that, but or how enforceable it is.
so, wait, the new code would say you could have a sign, but it can't be illuminated. So the open sign would not be permitted,
Okay.
would not be allowed
Chair?
if it's illuminated.
Commissioner Menke?
Doesn't 10-30-6, signs allowed by permit, nameplate signs, signs may be illuminated, but such lighting shall be diffused, indirect, or not illuminated beyond any lot line.
Yep, there is a conflict there, isn't there?
Yeah. But then it says home occupations or home daycare facilities, one non-illuminated nameplate sign.
Well,
Right.
And just,
go ahead.
he's talking about an internally lit sign versus one that's lit by a light from another source. I mean, how much do we need to get into this?
Because subsection A is referring to any of these R1
Yep.
to all the R1 districts.
All the R1 districts.
Or R districts, but. So maybe,
Within some of our R zoning, we do allow things like churches or schools or cemetery, for example. So I guess in their instance, they could have a nameplate sign that's illuminated. But for a home-based business, daycare, if I had a home office, a tax firm or something, then that subsection 1 would apply.
personally, I don't see an issue with the illuminated signs on the nameplates. If that just followed, I understand the need for it shall not exceed 2 square feet and the need for the sign being affixed to the dwelling immediately adjacent to the entrance. I just don't see the need for the non-illumination. Because I don't know that somebody would put something that gratuitous on their home and at that size, how gratuitous it could be. So I personally don't see a need for it. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels about that, but I would be okay with just striking that completely from the recommendation. If anybody else has any comments or thoughts on that.
Mr. Chair, I guess, if I may.
Yeah.
The only thought I have has been the sort of the way Burnsville looks at home businesses, where it's designed as a non-intrusive profession in a neighborhood. And I could see that may be where the non-illuminated nameplate sign for a business in a home, for home occupation would come from. So I could see that and would support the language as written, I guess.
Okay. I guess my thought process was at 2 square feet, it's probably not gonna shine into a neighbor's window, but, if I don't have any support on that, I can let that die. The next item question I had was on the, what was the justification to landing on the 8 seconds for the moving signs?
So that was to be consistent with how MnDOT, their practice and their regulations, so really just to be consistent. From my understanding, we have not had any major issues or complaints from the general public, from businesses, from our public works and law enforcement folks either. So 8 felt like it was consistent to what other agencies would allow, specifically MnDOT, because one of their main goals is, vehicular safety, and that, plus we would be more business friendly, so the combination of the two.
And then the reason for that question was, I don't see a need for a limit on that. I would have been comfortable seeing just moving signs. I was leaving Wilmer this weekend, and I drove by a church that had an animated sign, and it struck me, but it didn't take me off the road. And so this was another item where I thought, do we need a limit on timing, or is full, animation within the realm of possibilities? And again, I don't know how the rest of you feel about that. I didn't see any major issues if it was just stricken from any type of time limit. And I would ask your guys' thoughts on that too. Commissioner Badger?
I have a question for staff. I have a tendency to agree. We're going from 30 seconds to 8 seconds, and it seems to be a bit of a obstacle to just, 8 seconds from another regulatory piece. But I think we went from something dramatic down to 30 seconds when we changed it several years ago. I think the city made a change.
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar.
Okay.
I think it was several minutes, yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty sizable number down to 30 seconds. And so, sometimes I have a hard time in this environment knowing what staff's intention was do we have the whole background. But I would be supportive of, eliminating the timeframe at all. It seems to me to be a rule that's gonna be difficult to, if we're going from 30 seconds to 8, what's the difference? Just giving people the freedom to just have changeable copy and have it happen at whatever integral they want versus us going, well, no, it was 9 seconds, or it was 7 seconds. And so I don't know how staff feels about us making some minute changes to these, because I know in many cases there's a fair amount of background that got to why that needed to be set at 8 seconds, so.
In this particular case, this was at the direction of city council. It was brought up at a city council work session roundtable, and that was the proposal, to go to 8 seconds. You can certainly propose to make a change, to go in either direction or stay the same. Ultimately, city council will decide on any of the approvals.
That's true.
Commissioner Benke?
An example that I think might help is as you drive from Bloomington into Egan across the Cedar Bridge, there's one fairly significant billboard there that you can actually watch all 3 screens by the time you get across that area. When you come from Bloomington on 35W, as you come down the hill, there's the one movable billboard right there. And I inevitably catch one that just left my field of view. And then there's another one, and I never see anything again. So I think in that case, the 30 is a hindrance to a customer, the people that have the billboard. And I think that if MnDOT is good with 8 and City Council's good with 8, I'm okay with 8.
Commissioner Walter?
I would agree with Commissioner Benke. I think that MnDOT guidance is important, and I'm, not willing to go that rogue.
Well, that
with you.
means that Commissioner Marovich gets to be our tiebreaker tonight.
Chair, could I ask another?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
absolutely.
You had mentioned that other communities are less than 8. Was there some background there, or are we going to be odd or, different than some of the communities around us going to 8? Is Egan at like 5 and Apple Valley at 0, or what's the general consensus around us?
I've not done a market survey. I know, usually I include those charts.
Yeah.
But as Chair Workman stated, in Wilmer, used a, example, it changes, frequently from his experience. It really does vary. It varies on the community. Another community I worked in, it was, I believe, every 20 seconds. But yeah.
Well,
If you want to hold off or revisit this next year and we can come back with even more information, we can certainly do that.
We've gotten this far.
Yeah.
Just
I'm
to
not
give
looking
you
to make
guys
this more
some
difficult.
background on the sign that I saw, it was a small monument sign for a church. It wasn't a big billboard on a freeway. I mean, it was a thoroughfare, if that's the right term. But it was a guy playing a guitar. I mean, it was an animated thing showing an event at the church. So I guess in my head, I'm not thinking of a billboard on a freeway necessarily so much as maybe a Main Street business that might want to showcase something. That's where I was thinking, because freeway billboards are going to catch you. I mean, like you said, you can catch them. You can get enough on the approach, and then they get you. But JL Beers might want to do something that pops their business, and I looked at it as more of a business friendly to just remove it, because like Commissioner Bradrick said, at 8 seconds, if they're at 7 seconds, I mean, is that in ordinance enforcement? I don't know. So,
Sure.
Commissioner Benke?
I think that the big difference that I can offer here, or basically what I can offer here is that a billboard has certain setbacks, and the setbacks are there to provide the distance so that the vision has time to get a look at it, and monument signs have a different setback, which we've discussed here. And they're set up because you're not going 55 or 65 or 70 miles an hour. They're set up so for traffic. So I think that we've already done a lot of work trying to organize that part of it. I guess I'm not a fan of animation, I guess, at this point.
And this was specific to monument signs, billboards, or both?
Billboards are already at 8 seconds, so this would be specific to things like monument signs within our commercial zoning district, for example.
Okay. I'm gonna let Commissioner Marovich say what she thinks about this.
I think following the MnDOT recommendation of 8 seconds, it makes it more uniform.
Okay. All right. Well, we had a good conversation on it. So with that, are there any other questions on this? No other questions. All right. Well, then is this a public hearing? Yes, it is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing, and if anybody would like to come to the podium and say anything or ask any questions, now is your time. And seeing nobody, I will close the public hearing, and I will turn it over to the commission for any more discussion or a motion on this item.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Walter.
I will move that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the proposed ordinance as drafted.
We have a motion. Do we have a
Second.
second? Second by Commissioner Benke. All of those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. And that will go before the city council. Will that go on a city council meeting or a works?
City council meeting, January 16th.
January 16th. All right. Our next item, number 4, is the discussion of meeting times for future planning commission meetings. There was no background on this other than that the PNRC says to stay at 6:30 and the Economic Development Commission said to move it to 5:30. how contentious can we make this item?
So as you know, city council is currently at 5:30. When there was discussion early on, I think back in October, I think you guys had a pretty lengthy discussion and pros and cons and, put a lot of thought into the discussion and wanted to, some time to find out what other commissions were doing. So reporting back, what we know now from council is they're fine. If you want to start at 5 o'clock, if you want to start at 6, if you want to keep it at 6:30, it's really up to you. Do keep in mind, I think Commissioner Bradrick had mentioned that if you are proposing to change the time, it would be good for people as they're signing up to fill in any commission vacancies that they're aware, just so it's established, so that they know what they're getting into. If there's any more background or questions that I can answer, I'm more than happy to as well.
Okay. Does the commission have any questions or statements on this item?
Chair?
Commissioner Menke?
Well, I'm the one that brought it up. I am fine with 6:30. And actually, after listening to what the other commissions did, economic development, I can see them working with business much more. I can see them moving earlier and being customer friendly that way. I think because we're a little bit more public facing, and the planning and the park department is too, I can see us staying at 6:30. Thank you.
And a quick clarification on that piece, if one changes, do they all have to change, or, okay. Does anybody else want to speak to this? I'm comfortable staying at 6:30 as well. I don't know where Commissioner Walter or Frederick feel.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Walter?
Yeah, I don't have an opinion either way, I've got to say. So it doesn't seem to me like there's a reason to change, so I'm fine with keeping it at 6:30 as well.
Sure, I understand economic development, the people that sit on the commission don't live in many cases, don't live in Burnsville. To be on the EDC, you simply just have to work for a business that's here. So I believe that's a little more friendly opportunity for them because they're going to leave their business and go home or come back. For the PNRC and the Planning Commission, you need to live in the city of Burnsville. So there's a little different from a standpoint of travel and getting here. So I'm supportive of either time. I just don't think we should, if we were going to change to 5:30, my recommendation would be that we would, in caring of some other people, do it in the future, or if we're just going to stay at 6:30, that way the people that are applying or maybe filling vacancies know the time frame. That's all I
Commissioner
have, Chair.
Rovich?
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bradrick. Anything?
Don't have anything.
Okay. I think our consensus is just to leave it at 6:30.
Sounds good.
All right. Our final item on this evening's agenda is updates, and did you bring your book?
I know,
over there?
should I move over
No,
there?
you can stay here.
The next planning commission meeting is January 22nd. We do have 3 public hearings currently on the agenda. I'll pass. Also to note, there's a number of planning related items at the council work session tomorrow. So if you're able to watch that or attend, you're more than welcome to. We'll also report back. One of the topics is on the economic competitiveness, and not only were we looking for the direction of the planning commission, but then also from city council. So we'll report back any changes with that.
Okay. With that, is there any other updates from the commission? This is Commissioner Mirovich's last meeting with us tonight, so thank you very much for your time here.
Thank you for your time.
I'm sorry you have to move to Lakeville, but thank you for your time.
Her last meeting, she got chair with arms.
I did.
Yeah. That was our gift to you.
It's a nice gift.
It's been an issue.
Get rid of that chair.
Yep.
If there's no other updates, I would stand for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you for joining us tonight, and have a great rest of your evening.